Welcome everyone, Costini here with my gearing guide for the Protection Paladin in World of Warcraft Burning Crusade. Classic Phase 2, Tier 5 Best in Slot gearing. But first, before I talk about the proper raid gearing, I want to talk about resistance gearing. Starting with Frost Resistance. Now, these resistance gear sets are designed around only Phase 1 gear, not Phase 2. This is the kind of gear set you would take and have on the day SSC and Tempest Keep are opened. Helmet. Ice Guard Helmet, 50 Frost Resistance with another 20 Frost Resistance from the enchant, 20 defense rating, so 70 Frost Resistance from the helm. Then you have Pendant of Falling, 30 Frost Resistance, crafted neck. So from helm and neck, you get 100 Frost Resistance. Shoulder, Justigar, Cloak, Sergeant Heavy Cape because of the Resilience, which is going to be very useful. You can't care about Crush Cap in Resistance gear because even if Hydross crushes, you can't get crushing immunity. So that's something you should be aware of because Holy Shield won't work, which by the way means your threat on him will be lower. But you may have to tank him anyway, dependent on the strategy your guild is going to use. Chest, Ice Guard, Breastplate. You can go with a different chest enchant, like you could get Resilience on it if you need it. In this particular set, I don't need it, but if you need that extra resilience, go for it. Bracers of Dignity, which have higher defense and obviously the spell damage, so just a threat bonus there versus a Green Fortress. Just the fact that they have double the defense rating of Green Fortress is what makes Dignity worth it. Weapon, Gladiator's Gavel. This might be a bit of an issue to actually get your hands on. Now, Gladiator's Gavel, when Tier 5 comes out, is either going to be available for Honor, or it's going to be available for Arena points, but with no rating. But either way, really, it's something you can get right now, even though you need the rating for it, and you should try and get it at the moment. If you can't get it, it's not a big deal. You can get like a Resilience enchant on chest, or you can get some defensive gems to get the Crush Cap Shield. Aldori Legacy Defender. It goes without saying, best in slot shield until Tier 6. Gloves. Now, with gloves, you don't necessarily need Icebane Gauntlets, though they are a good choice because they give you that 32 Frost Resistance, 8 Defense Rating, 8 Frost Resistance, glove enchant. But you can also get a green item to help you get the resistance. To get the resistance cap. The resistance cap is 295. You need 295 unbuffed to be capped. Like you obviously would use Aura. So you need 365 fully buffed. This gear set has 300. Belt, Crimson Girdle of the Indomitable from Morose. You can also use obviously Girdle of Valorous Deeds if you so desire. Pants, Ice Guard Leggings, 60 Frost Resistance with 40 Stamina and 12 Agility. Battle Scar Boots with 2 12 Stamina Gems. Seal of the Exorcist from Spirit Shards because the resilience that it has and the spell damage it has. The Frozen Eye, crafted by a Jewel Crafter, 35 Frost Resistance. And then Trinkets Time-Lapse Shard from Keepers of Time Exalted. I know it's a pain in the neck getting exalted to them, but it has 27 stamina. It does have a good amount of resilience, so it's useful. And the second trinket, Adamantite Figurine. You could also get something like the Talisman of the Horde, if you so desire, for extra resilience. And the Librum of Eternal Rest. With this set, you have 338 spell damage unbuffed, which obviously isn't great, but it's a lot better than it could be. You are crit capped, like if we look here, boss crit chance 0%, between the combination of defense and resilience, that's how you are crit capped, and 300 frost resistance unbuffed. If you're going to tank Hydross, this is how you would look like, something along these lines. Then when we look at nature resistance, what's really changed here with nature resistance is you have Wild Guard, now Wild Guard Helm, Chest, Pants, and Wild Guard is better than Frost Resistance because it has higher defense rating, so it's easier to get to the crit cap with Wild Guard than it is with Frost Resistance. Pendant of Withering, with 30 nature resistance, and the natural ward go along with it. Otherwise, the gear is exactly the same. One difference, though, is there is a cloak enchant for 15 nature resistance. There isn't one for 15 frost resistance. There's one for 7, but it's a really expensive one, and it's not worth it, to be quite honest about it. It's not really worth paying that price when you can get frost resistance cap in some other way. But for nature resistance, it's totally worth it. And gloves, Iron Vine gauntlets are probably your best bet. Though you can, like as I've said with frost resistance, you can get a green item to help you reach the cap. Like you get the crafted items, then you get the green item to help you reach the cap. Or you can get some of the crafted, or some of the items from vanilla. Either way, mostly the same. With this set, exactly 295, 338. So your crit cap, you have, again, the same amount of spell power, and you are nature resistance cap. One of the things to say about resistance gearing is this. Some people will argue that using a flask for the purpose of resistance gearing is the way to go. Not as a paladin. The reason you don't want to do it as a paladin is Flask of Blinding Light is 80 holy spell power. That's worth more than multiple gear pieces combined. So with resistance gearing, you always want, obviously, to get the crit cap, to get the nature or frost resistance cap, or the resistance cap of whatever resistance you're working for, and you want to have as much fret as possible. The best option in terms of fret generation as a paladin is to be using Flask of Blinding Light. You don't want to be going around using a resistance flask because you're paying a heavy price in terms of your overall spell damage. Now, the Frost and Nature Resistance sets are for the situation where you'd be tanking Hydross. Or guilds could do something, which I think that maybe they should, which is have a Paladin tank with full Frost resistance and then another Paladin tank with Nature Resistance tanking Hydross and all of his adds at the same time. So when he goes in Nature, he spawns those 4 adds. The Paladin tanks not only him, but his adds as well at the same time. Maybe one is picked up by some Druid tank that, is going to generate a lot of fret so people can focus that. But all the other adds would be tanked by the Paladin tank. And you would have 2 Paladin tanks. That might end up being the meta. Especially if guilds don't end up using warrior tanks. Because warrior tanks right now, if you look at the Warcraft logs and top guilds, they're not really being used by the top guilds in their speed guilds. That might change, obviously, for Tier 5 for a variety of reasons, and this is a topic of discussion in its own right. But for a lot of guilds, the more natural path, if you would, is not to have a Paladin in a full Frost resistance set or a full Nature resistance set. It would be to have a combined set of Frost and Nature so you can tank the adds. Free 4 adds. Now, I've never tanked all the adds at the same time, but granted, I've played on private servers, they hit pretty fucking hard there. So whether or not you'll be able to do that in TBC Classic, that's a different discussion. Fret will be an issue. But if you're tanking, if you're building a combined set of Frost and Nature, your fret will be lower and you're going to have to make some sacrifices. In this particular set, I have 175 Nature resistance, 180 Frost resistance. Could get Nature a bit higher, but it's not really the most important. So what I'm using here is Iceguard Helm, Pendant of Foaming, so 100 Frost from that alone. Then I have the Frozen Eye, 35 more, then Icebane, 32 more, so that's 180 right there. For Nature Resistance, I have that 50 Nature Resistance enchant on the Sergeant's Heavy Cape. You may want to get 2 of these, by the way, because Sergeant's Heavy Cape is your go-to Fret Cloak as a prop paladin. So you may want to get 2 of these, one for resistance gearing, one for regular usage with dodge on it. Anyway, so 50 Nature Resistance on Cloak with a Wild Guard Breastplate for 60 more. So that's 75 from Cloak Enchant and the chest, and 60 more from Pants, and 35 from the Natural Ward. And that brings to a total of 175 Nature Resistance over there. But otherwise, same trinkets, same Librum, same weapon, bracers, all that kind of stuff. And this would be a pretty solid set. You could drop your resistances if the damage is low enough. You could drop your resistance, or you may want to actually increase them. Like if you want to increase them, that's going to be pretty tricky, but you know, you can still remove the belt if you so desire. Like you could still get rid of the belt as an example. You could maybe get some bracers that would help you, like green quality belt, green quality bracers. You don't need to worry too much about crit cap, though this is boss crit cap, but you don't need to worry about that, obviously, because you're tanking ads, which are lower level, so that's not as important. So you can sacrifice more if you need more resistance. Or alternatively, you could just get rid of these rings. If you want to increase your threat, you could get rid of both of these rings and put spell power rings instead if you're interested in increasing your threat. The situation you'll be dealing with will depend on the damage that the Hydross adds will be dealing, how good your DPS is, how good your guild is at killing them quickly and efficiently. So it all really does depend. And finally, let's talk about Tier 5 best in slot. There's very few things in Tier 5 that are hard-hitting, so Tier 5 gearing is more focused on threat versus survivability, though there are some survival pieces I've put here that you wouldn't usually use. Like, for instance, the cloak from Alar, you would probably use the sergeant's cape here most of the time, but you still want to get it because you still want to have those survival items. So in terms of items going from top to bottom, Crystal Forge, Face Guard. Now you can still use the Tier 4 here. Tier 4 will give you dodge versus block rating, and I prefer that personally. But this one has more armor and has slightly more spell damage. Yeah, we're going the Power Rangers route. Again, I've never been fond of the Tier 5 helmet, and if other people need it more than you, then you should let them have it. You can use the Tier 4 all the way until you get the Tier 6 one, or the Illidan helm. Just be aware of that. Neck, the Darkener's Grasp. This is best in slot for you as a prop paladin for the entire game. Like, there's other people for which it's really good, of course, casters, for instance, but there are very few, like elemental shamans, for instance, for which this is as good. Like, casters will get a replacement once they get in tier 6. You won't. Like, make this point to your guild. This is literally the best neck in the game. So, it doesn't matter when you get it, as long as you get it before tier 6 comes along. Shoulders, Crystal Forge shoulder guards, better than tier 4. Get these. You should use these. Cloak, Phoenix Wing Cloak from Alar. Though you may want to use the PvP cloak, all the same. Chest, Justicar, Chest Guard. The reason you want to use Justicar, Chest Guard versus Crystal Forge is if you look at the stats, yes, Crystal Forge has more block value. That doesn't matter, by the way. Block value is not an important stat. It doesn't have block rating. So Justicar is better for the sake of crush cap. And yes, you still care about the crush cap regardless of what people might say. In fact, one of the biggest advantages for Paladin tanks in tier 5 gearing versus tier 4 gearing is with tier 5 gearing, you can get crush cap without having to make some of the sacrifices you have to do in tier 4. That's one of the principal advantages. And it's because of items like the Darkener's Grasp. It's because of the risk cards of determination. It's because of the boots, the belt, the gloves, the pants that you can manage that. Weapon, bracers, risk cards of determination. Warriors don't care about these because they want to use the Ataman ones, the Ataman bracers, because they're better for them from a threat perspective, and they care about that. So these are really good for you. Weapon, Fang of the Leviathan. You can argue that the PvP weapon, the Gavel, is better because of the resilience, sure. But from a pure threat perspective, Fang is the best in slot PvE weapon. And yes, every caster wants it. And you will have some arguments. Getting this is a luxury item. Most of the time, if you can get, the Gladiator's Gavel, or even better, the Merciless Gladiator's Gavel, that would be a better choice. But if we're talking just purely best in slot PvE weapons, Fang of the Leviathan is the best choice. Shield, Eldori Legacy Defender, best in slot until tier 6. Gloves, Crystal Forge, Handguards. When it comes to tier 5, by the way, many people, like, you share it with rogues and shamans. Rogues don't matter, and shamans want to keep their tier 4 2-step bonus because of the benefit that gives their raid. So you may get priority on tier 5 all the same. The gloves are great because the block rating, the spell damage. I mean, the maiden gloves are technically better from a pure survivability perspective. So are the royal gauntlets of Silvermoon, just because of the higher stamina. But most of the time, you'll be fine using the Crystal Forge handguard. So you may want to get the royal gauntlets of Silvermoon all the same, just for a survival set eventually. Belt girdle of the Invulnerable from Leofras the Blind. Really good because of the parry and dodge rating. It's about the same in terms of like crush cap as the Morose belt, but obviously you're getting dodge and parry, which is always better. Most of the time you can use the girdle of Valorous Deeds if you get a good luck with that. Pants Crystal Forge leg guards, really good pants for the sake of, the amount of spell damage on these is insane, so you should use these most of the time, though. Yeah, Rin is better for pure survivability if you care about that. Boots of the Resilient from Solarian. Warriors will want these as well. They're really good boots with high block rating, high stamina, 2 gem sockets. Rings, Spectral Band of Innervation, which is from the first boss of Karazhan. You can also get the 7th ring of Terrace Fallen for the sake of a Crush Cap set, if you're interested in that. But most of the time you can use a Spectral Band of Innervation, and then you have Ring of Sundered Soul from Morgrim Tidewalker. Get this ring, it's really good when we're talking about an avoidance ring. Alternatively, of course, you can you can still use the Spirit Shard ring, or you can use some Spell Power ring if you're interested in Fret. Trinkets, Tome of Fiery Redemption and Icon of the Silver Crescent. Why these two as opposed to the McFerrin trinket, you might ask? Well, here's the logic behind it. Icon of the Silver Crescent is Fret on Demand, which is something that the McFerrin trinket cannot offer you. So you have control of when you gain that extra Fret. That's the great part. Tome of Fiery Redemption has a very high proc chance, and importantly, if you're careful with it, you can make it so that the procs, it will proc a lot, it can proc at the start of a fight. So that means you're getting close to 300 spell power at the start of a fight. That's really damn powerful. Now, the catch of all of this is it has, or at least it had on private servers, it had a 1-minute internal cooldown, and it can proc on anything. Like if you bless someone, it can proc. So when you're doing blessings before a fight and you want to optimize your Fret, you should just be careful. Like try and bless, then wait a minute before you pull, or try and bless so quickly that you have that minute. But still, it's very powerful. Last 10 seconds, 1 minute internal cooldown. It's a lot of Fret. I really like the Tome of Fiery Redemption, and I certainly prefer it versus McFerrin's Eye. Just personal opinion on this, though. Of course, if you can get McFerrin's Eye, maybe you want to use that in certain situations, right? I mean, it's not like there's a lot of choices in terms of spell power trinkets. I mean, that's the thing about McFerrin's Eye. It's not. I'm not necessarily fond of it, but there's very few alternatives in terms of pure spell power trinkets, so you should still get it all the same. And with all of this gear, you have 14,000 HP. You can get 15,000 easily by just swapping trinkets. 500 spell power, 502 defense, and you are crush capped if you're using this particular set. You could improve your spell power even further if you so desire with a ring, bracers, belt, cloak, and maybe even neck. All right, you can improve your spell power. In fact, if I swap these around, like let's say I swap the bracers around, I swap the belt around, I swap the ring around. I might lose crush cap doing this for the record, but I swap all these around, and then I swap the cloak around. That's 100 spell power from that. From that, I'm still crit capped with this set, though not crush capped. Though that can be easily solved with the Libram or having Scorpitzing. You would still have, on bosses, you'd still have crush cap if you had Scorpitzing, even with this set, though. You lose some HP, of course, compared to those other gear pieces. And that is all there is to say here. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.